We are talking law on Radio 97, and if you have a question that you would like Despina to answer here on the radio, you can do that by sending us some details. Just pop them into an email, perhaps. You could do that by going to radio97.com.au. You'll find the email address right there, radio97.com.au.
All right, this one is a juicy corporate tale. That is a quote from Despina. It involves a garage and a wheelie bin. What is going on?
That should be really good. Wheelie, see what I did there? Yeah.
That's a good one. Yes.
Yeah.
Dad.
I'll leave now. Yeah.
Bye, Wayne. Job done. Really juicy topic this morning. Despina, talk us through what happened in Hendra, Queensland.
Okay, so we want to be clear. This is a body corporate, another juicy body corporate tale. And I like to talk about these because, as I said in the last segment, these are stories, but they're real stories, and they affect people, everyday Australians. And when you look at the statistics, there's so many people living in bodies corporate, right? So whether it's a townhouse building complex like this one was a 36 townhouses in Hendra, or whether you're in a mid-rise, so anything up to 8, 9, 10, 11, or 11, 12 levels, or whether you're in a high rise, okay? So you're in a body corporate, which is community living, okay? And you have bylaws that you've got to comply with, which are rules for the building and the use of all the common areas, okay? So this one really struck me because I thought, I wonder if people actually read the bylaws before they actually buy a unit or a townhouse in a body corporate, and most of them don't.
We don't.
Yeah.
Nah, we just move in. Looks nice.
So the bylaws are super important because the bylaws are the rules already set down by the body corporate about how you can live in the complex and what you can and cannot do with your lot on the outside or inside, structural changes, how you can use all the common areas. Now, this case was all about the storage and use of garbage bins. Okay, so you might think, oh, what's the big deal? Garbage bins are usually kept, somewhere in a basement or somewhere outside, maybe on on the patio or in a backyard. And of course, everyone has bins where they get emptied typically once a week, although sometimes there are complexes up here where they get emptied twice a week for some reason, lucky them. But this particular one involved a bylaw. It's an unusual bylaw, I will say that, because the bylaw talked about the storage of rubbish bins, which I'll mention in a little bit because I want to sort of build up to it. So this particular lot owner got into trouble with the body corporate, and he was being issued with multiple breach notices because he breached a bylaw, which we'll read out in a minute. And what he was doing is he had his garbage bins, but he kept them on common property. And common property is not the property that belongs to a lot owner, it belongs to the body corporate. So really, generally, you can't just go and use common property for yourself because it belongs to everybody. Yeah. Okay. So he was putting the bins on the common property and then taking them out on the bin morning, bringing them back that night, right? And apparently other lot owners were doing it as well. So he was getting into trouble because, and here's the clincher, the bylaw actually says that all owners and occupiers must store their garbage bins inside the garage of their lot. Yeah, which is unusual when you think about it. So this is a townhouse. So you've got a garage, whether it's a single or double garage, as all townhouses typically have. And you had to keep the bins inside the garage. Now, people might be listening going, oh, well, I wouldn't like to keep my garbage bin in my garage because of smells, odors. It might attract vermin, rodents, all sorts of things, particularly in the heat. We've got a heat wave at the moment, so it makes it even worse. But this was unusual because it actually required the lot owners to keep it in the garage. So it was mandatory. It was a bylaw.
Wow, no other option. You got to do it.
No other option, absolutely. So he took the body corporate, or I think the body corporate actually took him, to the tribunal because he kept breaching the bylaw. He goes, I don't want to keep my bin in the garage. I don't like that. Okay.
What was his reasoning? Was that because of vermin? Did he specify?
Well, he was proposing, as I understand it, was a health hazard. Okay. And I understand that. All right. And he was also putting forward that, look, there are lots of other people in the complex that do what I do. So why don't you go bother them and stop
Yeah.
bothering me and singling me out? And the body corporate said, well, we're aware of those people and we've issued breach notices as well, and they've actually complied now, and they're keeping their bins in their garage. So he was sort of, pushed into a corner where they basically ended up taking him to the tribunal, and basically they wanted the adjudicator to rule on whether he had to keep the bin in the garage, whether he did breach a bylaw, and the consequences of that. So look, the adjudicator's role, as we've talked about before, is to make orders that are just and equitable, right? When there's a dispute. So obviously we've got a dispute between a body corporate and a lot owner. You've got a body corporate saying, comply, comply, comply. And the lot owner saying, no, I don't want you because I don't like it, or I don't want to keep my bin in the garage. And you sort of, at first glance, you think, oh, that's pretty, logical and feasible. He doesn't want to keep it in the garage. But unfortunately for this lot owner, he did not win. He lost because
He lost.
yes, because the bylaw said he had to keep the bin in the garage, and there was no way around that. Okay. And look, I wouldn't like to live in a complex that had a bylaw like that, I can tell you, and I would not want to keep my bin in a garage either. Doesn't matter how clean you keep the bin. It's just because, mostly bins are kept outdoors, and there's a reason for that. So I guess why I wanted to raise it this morning is, as I said, it's a real issue. It was determined 1st of February this year. So it's a very recent case through the tribunal. Very recent. Yes, very recent. So I guess the lesson here that I wanted to give buyers or listeners out there who are buyers of property is that you should always check the bylaws. Okay, so typically when we have buyers buying into bodies corporate, we do generally check the bylaws, and we look for things like animal bylaws, what's their requirements to keep pets, alterations to the lot, exclusive use areas, which are very important. What are the hours of operation of pools and other common areas, and anything unusual that we look for. Right. And to me, if I found a bylaw that said this, I would consider it a little bit unusual, and you'd want to alert your buyers to this fact and say, hey, do you know that there's a bylaw that says your bins have to be stored in the garage? Now, that may not upset many people, particularly, I suppose, if they're buying to rent a property out to someone else, sure. But if you're going to live there, it might, offend you, or it might upset you. And you can't just go in and not comply with the bylaw. And you can't also just go in and say, hey, let's change the bylaw, because that would require resolutions, special resolutions or unanimous resolutions to be passed, where everybody has to agree to change a bylaw. And that's a big deal. That takes a lot of time and effort.
The irony of that is, when you mention this story, Despina, is that I've had 2 agents in the past, say, 2 or 3 years say, don't put your bins anywhere near the place. We weren't even allowed to actually keep our wheelie bins close towards the actual unit that we were in because of vermin. And they said that because originally we did have it near the house, and they said, no, we don't do that anymore. You have to put it over here. So the fact that it's the opposite way around, and some people might be used to one way and then move to a place and it's completely opposite, it can, stump a few people.
So you got to check all of those bylaws before you sign. Yeah, you
do. And unfortunately for this lot owner, he also couldn't produce evidence at the hearing that it was a health hazard. See, if you're going to go to the tribunal, right, and you've got to push for a particular viewpoint, you've got to give evidence. And I would have thought that he could easily obtain that evidence if he thought about it. And obviously he might have represented himself here. So you need to always collect that evidence to support your argument, right? And that's really important. But look, in New South Wales, the bylaws are always attached to the contract. So you get to read the bylaws up front, before you sign, whereas in Queensland, we don't have that requirement.
Sneaky.
I know, but, we possibly will be moving towards that in about 12 months' time, when there's a new seller disclosure regime coming out in Queensland that I'm aware of. So I think that new regime will dictate that vendors, owners, will attach the bylaws with the contract before you sign. So there's that upfront disclosure. But look, at the moment, there isn't that requirement. So you should always check those bylaws whilst your contract's conditional.
Definitely.
Okay?
Really definitely some good light reading before bed one night. That'll be good.
Exactly.
And if anyone wants to get in touch with you directly, Despina, for any sort of legal advice, where can they go?
So they can phone our office 55291 294 and speak to my staff or myself. And they can always email info@priyalalegal.com.au.
Amazing. And we'll talk to you next week.
See you then.
Great. See you then, guys.